G'day folks, it's Tony here. Tonight, my girlfriend wants to make something nice for dinner and she's tasked me with going to get some ingredients for her. Which is no biggie because this week I'm driving a Nissan X Trail and cars like this were basically born to do mundane things like go to the shops. So I got my shopping list. Let's duck down to the local grocery store and see if we can get all of the things that she needs. In the process, I think we'll learn a few things about this car as well. Let's go get some chow. Okay, so first impressions time. I'm driving the Ti variant, which is the range topper of the X Trail family, and as such it's got the longest feature list. It's also a $45,000 car, which is a fair sized chunk of change for something like this, but I reckon there's a little bit of wriggle room in that price tag. We'll talk more about that later. But right now, I'm in a pretty pleasant cabin. It's not one that really wows me in any great way, but it's nice enough. Yeah, there's some hard plastics here and there, but there's also some nice touches like this vinyl upholstered panel on the dashboard. The steering wheel is really nice to grip, it's a good size, and it's got buttons all in the right place. Everything falls neatly to hand. There's a lot of buttons to play with. It's just a little bit dated, you know, it's a bit behind the times, and that's not a surprise because this car is pretty old. Came into existence in 2013 and it's been on sale in Australia since 2014. It had a mid-cycle update in 2017, but now in 2020, it does look a little bit old hat. And to be honest with you, the place where it looks the oldest is probably right here. This infotainment system, a 7-inch display in the Ti variant, it's really behind the times. The graphics are antiquated, they're not the easiest to read, the pixel density of the screen itself is kind of low, and it's a bit slow to respond. There's better systems in the Nissan world, such as the one that you find in the Nissan Leaf, for example. This is definitely not right at the pointy end of its segment, that's for sure. And there are other areas where it does kind of look a little bit old, things like the switchgear, the buttons, and sort of various cabin furniture around here. It does look a bit antiquated in this day and age. But look, this kind of stuff isn't really a deal breaker, and there are a lot of other things to talk positively about, such as the fact that you have seat heaters, not just for the front two seats, but also a seat heater for the back seats. Also, the steering wheel heated as well, which is really nice in winter. And then there's that gigantic sunroof. This panoramic sunroof lets in so much light, gives the cabin a really nice and light and airy and spacious feel, which is fantastic. And on top of that, you also have perforated leather upholstery on the seats, which is, let's face it, it's pretty synthetic as far as leather goes, but it feels nice. It doesn't have any weird odor or anything like that. And so, yeah, I approve. You can also get the Ti variant with a pretty appealing tan or light brown upholstery color, which is probably the one that I'd choose because it does sort of offset all the other black stuff that's in this cabin. It can be a little bit dark if you have the panoramic sunroof closed. Okay, we are at the shops, which is a pretty good excuse to demonstrate one of the X Trail's party tricks, which is its parking camera system. All you have to do is pull up, and it automatically comes on when you select reverse, and then comes up with these guidelines on the screen and also a top-down camera view, so you can see all the way around your car, which is very handy to make sure that you're within your lines. And one more thing, if you press the camera button one more time, it'll come up with a curbside view so that you can keep track of your front left wheel and make sure you don't grind it against whatever you're parking next to, which is fantastic. Should mean that curbed rims are a thing of the past. But for now, let's go and do some shopping. Gallagher? What the hell is that? Well, that's super annoying. There was one thing on the list that I couldn't find, so now I've got to go to another store. Oh, you probably saw what I did with the tailgate back there. If you have the key in your pocket and you walk up to the rear of the car and swing your foot under the rear bumper, the power-operated tailgate opens automatically. It's a really handy feature, especially if you're coming back from the shops with an armful of bags. I really like that kind of stuff in cars like this. Also, the X Trail has this really clever but also very simple cargo management system. The boot floor is actually a false floor. It's a two-level thing, but it's also split, which means that the rearmost section you can just lift up and form a wall with it, which you can then use to contain your bags. If you just have one or two bags, you don't want them bouncing around the boot as you drive along, because all your stuff will spill out and you'll have to collect it up, or you'll crack some eggs or whatever. This system just means that you can contain it in a fairly localized area, and it's closer to the bumper where you remove it, so it just makes it easier to retrieve your stuff. Two very cool features which I really like about the X Trail. Well, I mean, they're not cool. If you think they're cool, you're kind of a bit of a nerd, but they're useful features, really useful features, and I appreciate that. You can get a 7-seat version of the X Trail, but to be honest, I reckon its rear cabin is better utilized by the boot rather than a third row of seats. Measuring 565 litres with the seats up, it's one of the more useful load areas in its class. Okay, let's talk about how the X Trail drives. This is the 2.5 litre petrol version. You can also get a 2 litre naturally aspirated petrol and a 2 litre turbo diesel. But this is the biggest petrol engine they've got. It's not anything that will wow you, especially around town. It's hooked up to a CVT transmission, so it can be a little bit of a noisy slug if there's a big hill in your way, but just driving around town, doing suburban kind of stuff, it's pretty good. It's a pretty relaxed kind of car. It's quiet most of the time until you ask for a big acceleration from it. But to be honest, it's not really the most impressive powertrain in the segment. There's torquier engines out there, there's quieter engines out there, there's more decisive gearboxes out there. It could be better, but it's not bad. The suspension is a little bit firmer than I was expecting for an SUV, I'll be honest. It's got this kind of brittle sensitivity to very small bumps, things that you normally wouldn't feel along a road. Big bumps is actually quite good. It's just a little bit sensitive, I guess, at this sort of fine corrugations. Not really a deal breaker, but I would say definitely go for a test drive and try it on the bumpiest road that you can find, or even just a regular road, and see if the suspension is something that would bother you. For me, it's okay, but I think it could be a little bit softer. The steering is pretty light, but that's good for getting around town. Makes light work of suburban intersections, and certainly makes life pretty easy if you're in a tight and cramped car park. No big complaints there. It's not the most dynamic vehicle, but come on, it's a mid-size SUV. It's not a sports car, so I wouldn't feel good about marking it down for having light steering. Here's an on-ramp. I'm going to floor it, and you can hear the sweet sounds of a Nissan X Trail. It's not exactly slow, but it definitely is noisy. Out here on the highway, the X Trail is actually pretty good. It's kind of relaxed. It lopes along fairly well, as long as, again, you're not faced with too much of an incline. But the engine settles down a lot. It's ticking over at basically 1600 RPM, and it's fairly quiet. The suspension is also settled down too. It's not as fussy as it feels on slower roads. And you've also got things like active cruise control to help you out, and blind spot monitoring as well to make sure you don't merge into anyone else or anything like that. It's a pretty good car for highway work. Although if you are doing lots of long distance drives, then I think that's the point where the diesel option probably starts looking a little bit more attractive. But for most people, I think the petrol is probably going to be more efficient on a day-to-day basis, especially like in a city. To give you an idea, I've been averaging high 9, so right now we're at 9.9 litres per 100 kilometres, which is in line with what I'd expect for this car. I've mainly been doing just urban stuff, not a whole lot of highway, so that figure sounds about right to me. Do you reckon a German supermarket knows what galangal is? Fun fact time. Did you know that galangal is a key part of Southeast Asian cuisine, that's also known by the English name of finger root? Did you also know that it's bloody hard to find in the shops? Ask me how I know. Let's talk about passenger comfort. In the Ti grade, your front seat passenger also gets a power adjustable driver's seat, but it's only 4-way adjustable rather than the 6-way seat that you, the driver, sits on. The back seats are great. Not only is the seat base jacked up high, but there's loads of legroom and a fairly flat floor as well. Fitting 3 kids back here would be easy, and all of them should get a pretty great view through the big side windows and that massive panoramic sunroof. There's a pair of air vents to keep them cool, and the second row can also slide forward if you need to boost the boot capacity a little. If you have a long trip, the backrest reclines as well, so your companions can cop a snooze with more ease. Alright, this place had better have it. I swear to God. Oh, thank Christ for that. Alright, I need to get home, so let's wind this up. I haven't spoken much about the things that I don't really like about this car, so let's cover those off. Firstly, this thing has a foot-operated parking brake. Can you hear that? Down there. It's 2020, Nissan. We shouldn't be doing this kind of thing anymore. It's primitive, get rid of it and replace it with an electronic parking brake like everybody else. Secondly, while this interior is far from terrible, I just don't understand why the little wallet tray down here at the base of the center stack has to be made out of such hard, scratchy plastic. People throw their phones in there, they throw their keys in there, and when you're driving along, the sound of a hard object against a hard surface just generates all this rattling. Why not just make it out of a softer plastic instead? Or better yet, why not put something like a wireless phone charging pad down there? This is supposed to be the flagship X Trail, and that's the kind of feature that you're finding a lot in other flagships in the segment. I know this car is pretty old, but that kind of feature not being around in this day and age kind of stands out, for the wrong reasons. There's also only one USB charging point in the entire car, and it's right down here, which means the kids in the back are going to be literally fighting for power if mummy and daddy up front aren't already doing so. Again, it's 2020, features like that do matter. As for complaints about driving, well, it's perfectly adequate, but not really much more than that. I've mostly been driving around just by myself, and it drives fine with just one person aboard, but I do get the sense with a few more passengers and cargo, it'd start to feel kinda slow. There is a diesel option and it's got a little more power and a lot more torque, but it also retails north of $50,000, and I'm not really sure that it's worth it at that price point. But here's the thing, there's an all-new X Trail just around the corner. It's available in the US as the Nissan Rogue, and we should be seeing it in Australia sometime next year. It seems like a pretty decent car, and one that should solve most of my criticisms about the current X Trail. However, given an all-new model is just around the corner, Nissan dealers might be keener than ever to do a sharp deal on the current generation X Trail. So if you're in the market, use that knowledge to your advantage. The X Trail I'm testing here might be a bit long in the tooth, but you could be able to grab one as a bit of a bargain buy if you're a savvy negotiator. And at the end of the day, you'll still be getting a car that is more than perfectly adequate for just running around town with your family. And I reckon that just about does it for my review of the Nissan X Trail Ti. I hope this review was informative for you. If you liked it, please do consider giving it a like, and if you aren't already, also consider subscribing to my channel, because I've got a whole bunch of other car-related news, reviews, and analysis videos in the pipeline, and you don't want to miss out on any of that. Thanks once again for watching, and I will see you in the next one.